Okay, it's Monday, the 6th of July, 2020, nearly 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And I've been trying to organise my thoughts on the subject of the culture. Because I think it's my conviction that there's a problem with the culture right now. And has been for quite a while. And with the lockdown and all these other things that are going on, of course it's brought into sharp relief the problems with in my case playing music to people, and this seems to be the focus of a lot of things I'm seeing online amongst people I know. And I've been trying to figure out a way to talk about this, to try and correct the perspectives, perhaps, of some of the commentary that I see. I did do another presentation where I talked about some of the petitions that I've seen online. And after some thought about this, I decided to take the following approach. And it's a kind of a broad brush approach, and it doesn't concern solely playing music to people in pubs. Some years ago, I had brought to my attention the phenomenon of the Grand Tour, which was an 18th century project, a Renaissance project, of cultural education for British rich young men, which at the time involved making a journey down to Italy, where there were 4 main meccas where these guys would basically try to get an education on the Hellenistic, Roman, classical culture. Now, in the 18th century, that was not an easy journey. The roads that existed at the time were not like our roads at all. And, of course, it required a trip across the Alps. And this typically took place in the early part of the year, in the middle of winter. And, it was by the spring that they were getting into Italy, where, the climate was more temperate. And their cultural education really began. The third Mecca on the journey was Naples. And in those days, that was a 5-day journey from Rome. And when I first heard about this, it stuck with me, because I thought that there was something important about, the effort that was taken to try and expose people to the Hellenistic traditions at that time. In Naples, there is a museum which is called the National Archaeological Museum. And it contains what has been called, let's have a look what it's called. I haven't got it written down here, have I? The Fenesi collection, It was owned by a family called the Farneses, who died out, and the collection was inherited by the King of Naples. And then, so it was moved from the Palace of Rome to this institution, this museum. And what I'm going to show you now is one of the exhibits. This thing you see in the background, this is called the Hercules Bull. It tells the story of, or it's a scene from the fable of Dirce. Dirce is here. She is about to be murdered by these two guys who are taking revenge on her for her mistreatment of their mother. And the manner of the murder is that she is going to be tied to the bull and dragged to her death and then thrown into a well. So that's basically the scene there. Now, there's a few notable things about this. First of all, the people in the foreground give you some idea of the size of this sculpture. Now remember, this was moved wholesale from the Palace of Rome in the 18th century to where it now stands in Naples. And they managed to do it without breaking it. And so, you know, that's something of an achievement in itself. And of course, it's impressive because of its size. And it enjoys pride of place in this exhibition hall. And it's self-evidently Greco-Roman in style. But the thing is, it's not actually a very good sculpture. Not by the standards of some of the other exhibits. Some of the things you can't even see. You can see the figure in the background. That's actually part of the same sculpture. From some other angles, you can see behind this sculpture, which is in the foreground somewhat, there is there's an onlooker, an observer who's not involved in the scene but is watching it. He's looking at the arse of this figure. You know, he's looking up at the events, and you know, in his line of sight is the pelvic floor muscle of this guy here. And of course, you know, people wandering around find themselves in the line of sight of, you know, some of these things. The base of the sculpture, which you can't really see here because of people in the foreground, has the appearance of having been done by a guy who ran out of ideas, who just wanted to get the thing finished. And so there are all sorts of irrelevant things in it. You know, the heads of owls, there's some snakes, some birds, and, you know, it's all pretty nondescript and kind of irrelevant to the scene. Arguably the best part of it is the dog, which you can just see there. It would appear that sculptors of the day paid particular attention to doing their animals. Dirce herself has a particularly non-terrified expression on her face, despite being about to be crushed by this bull, which doesn't look that big, actually. So, you know, but the whole thing is impressive, and it's in a particularly well lit part of the exhibition hall there. All these works are part of the Farnese collection, but there is one other exhibit which is a much better piece of work than this, and also was much more influential in shaping the iconography of the Hellenistic tradition, you know, as passed down for 200 years or more. And that's this. This is Hercules, and the craftsmanship on this is second to none. This was done by a guy you've probably never heard of, Glycon. So, not one of the greats, not Rodin or Michelangelo or people you've heard of. And he looks pretty relaxed there, and there's just the detail on this, the musculature, it looks alive. And to give you some idea of the size, there's Brian Sewell standing in the foreground there. To get to this exhibit, you have to walk down a corridor from the other one. The scene that you're looking at is facing directly away from the exhibit that we looked at a moment or two before. This stuff ought to be taught in schools, I think. The idea of how good culture can be. And I think that's the way I would put this. We need to figure out a way to defend what we do. And in order to do that, we need to be able to do things that are defensible, that are so unarguably worthy, that really the burden is on the other side to show why it's not worth it. And I think that gets to the heart of, the what I'll call the crisis in culture right now. No one can figure out a way to defend what we do. We say it's important, but no one really knows why. And I think that stems from the 90s, or it really got going in the 90s in an obvious way. But the ideas of the 90s had their roots in the very early 20th century. That may be the subject of another presentation. Because I think that, our relationship to culture is something that's actually worth talking about. Perhaps people who are in bands and people who play in pubs are not aware that they're participating in the culture. Perhaps they're not aware of that. Perhaps they're skeptical that they can do something as worthy as this. But I think it behoves us all to reach for this ideal in what we do, whether it's music, sculpture, poetry, whatever. I'm coming to the belief that we need to do that first as artists, if that's what we think we are. And we could do a lot worse than look back at the past and try and figure out what it is that we're actually doing. And so, that's really my faltering attempts to try and give some kind of expression to the problems that I see abroad. Anyway, so a bit of housekeeping first of all, or lastly. I noticed that I broke 10 subscribers on YouTube over the weekend. I'm going to have to see who those people are, see who the blazes is following me. So thanks for that. I would tell you to like, share and subscribe, but, I don't care whether you do, really. And I suppose that's really all I've got to say on this right now. So long. Thanks for all the fish.